Sando Trini. A San Fernando Story. Mel the Deportee. Part 7. Mel followed behind Mr. Gums and pretended to be heading to the left of the supervisor's shack. He was on the construction site at Embacade. He held a bucket in his hand. It was empty except for a revolver. When Mr. Gums was about to close the door of the shack, Mel violently pushed the door open. He dropped the bucket and flashed his weapon. Mr. Gums was surprised and he fell to the floor. He looked up and into the barrel of Mel's illegally rented firearm. He knew that it was time to relinquish his hold on the satchel full of bills. He made a withdrawal less than an hour before, from the Royal Bank of Trinidad and Tobago, on High Street in San Fernando. The construction supervisor, Mr. Beto, was about to stand up when he saw Mr. Gums enter the door, but the assault on Mr. Gums made him sit down again. Mel worked quickly. He stared into the eyes of one man, then another. His gestures with the barrel of the gun spoke loudly. He was again in charge and remembered what it felt like taking on such a risky job. He had similar encounters with men and money when he worked for a certain celebrity rapper. It was his reputation for similar crimes which brought him to the attention of his rapper boss while he lived abroad. His experience served him well. He instructed Mr. Beto to tie up Mr. Gums with a piece of rope he conveniently carried in his back pocket. With Mr. Gums secured, he had only one man to control. He reached into his pocket again and took out another piece of rope which he used to tie Mr. Beto to his chair. With the satchel over his shoulder, and his revolver concealed under his shirt, Mel closed the door of the construction shed and walked out into the afternoon sunshine. A group of men waited outside as they did on Fridays when Mr. Gums's arrived. Mel dipped into the satchel, grabbed a few $100 bills and flung them into the air. The men were shocked, but only for a split second. Before the bills landed around their muddy boots, the men recovered and started fighting each other for the money. Mel continued walking towards the gate. Without looking back, he threw a few more bills behind him. The men ran towards the bills which rained from Mel's generous hand. Vernon pushed open the passenger side door. The car was moving when Mel climbed in and closed the door. Vernon drove away slowly. He did not want to attract attention to the car. He drove back to the Chancery Lane car park and returned the car and guns to Teddy, and paid him for the rentals. When Teddy was told of their success, he was impressed by Vernon's new partner and his operation in broad daylight. He asked them if they would be interested in a very big job. The details of the job made Vernon's eyes widen with disbelief, but greed quickly turned his eyes into reptilian slits. Mel had a similar response to the details of the proposed job. He saw it as a chance to show Vernon and others his deadly side. Teddy explained to the two men that a certain well-known businessman from Piparo had a problem he wanted fixed as soon as possible. The problem was that he was already in jail and faced the possibility of never being released, or worse, his execution. The businessman, who also owned a massive citrus plantation in Cedros, had 3 other cases dismissed after the witness in each case stopped breathing. He paid $1 million to have a state witness poisoned. The attempt failed and was willing to pay $3 million for another attempt on the life of that witness. To complicate matters, the targeted state witness was a special reserve policeman. And he was in a safe house provided by the Witness Protection Program of Trinidad and Tobago. Mel was ecstatic. He dreamed of such a job since he was deported from the only place he knew as home. He thought that his dreams were about to come true with such an offer from Mr. DC. When Mel learned the identity of his new client, he rated Mr. DC as a real calabash mango. Mel recalled his encounter with Miss Rose at the San Fernando market. She said that a calabash mango type needed walls for protection, and they were wealthy. Mr. DC lived on the Piparo main road in a compound where he built his own temple to worship according to his religion. He was protected by very high walls crowned by double rows of razor wire. Ironically, Mel missed the point that Mr. DC was arrested and removed from his own walls of protection in Piparo and was sitting behind walls of confinement in prison. Mel accepted the job. And he was about to fall back into the deadly world of dreams and illusions, where the only rules were those made by the last man standing. To be continued.